Love beyond the years. The sun was setting over the luxurious mansion that Caroline Montgomery had called home for decades. A life marked by high society, private jets, charity galas, and endless accolades. Her world was everything she had ever dreamed of. She had it all: money, status, and success. Yet something was missing. At 70, with wrinkles that told stories of her years, Caroline found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror, unsure of what the next chapter in her life would look like. But everything changed the day she met Lucas. He was 18. Bright-eyed, eager, and full of youthful energy, Lucas entered her life as an intern at one of her companies. He wasn't just any young man. He was different. While most of the other interns were preoccupied with their careers and ambitions, Lucas had a carefree spirit, an infectious laugh, and a heart full of dreams. Something about him stirred feelings in Caroline she had long forgotten. Their first conversation happened on a breezy afternoon in the garden. She had been standing by the fountain, lost in thought, when Lucas approached, holding a book of poetry in his hands. He'd noticed the melancholic expression on her face, and without thinking asked, "What's on your mind?" Her initial reaction was to dismiss him, to push him away. After all, what could an 18-year-old possibly understand about her life? But when their eyes met, she saw something familiar. A longing for connection, a desire for understanding. Their conversation flowed naturally, and as the minutes turned into hours, Caroline felt an undeniable spark. Lucas was different. He was not enamored with her wealth or her name. Instead, he was drawn to her wisdom, to the layers of life etched in her every word. And Caroline, so used to being admired for her status, felt for the first time in years that someone truly saw her, not as a millionaire, but as a woman. As the weeks went by, their encounters became more frequent. The company's boardroom became a place for whispered conversations and stolen glances. Caroline had always been composed, always in control, but Lucas made her feel alive, like she was seeing the world for the first time. However, their relationship was far from simple. When the whispers of their growing closeness reached Caroline's family, chaos ensued. Her children, Allison, Victor, and Stephen, were furious. They couldn't understand why their mother, a woman who had spent her entire life building an empire, would fall for a young man nearly half her age. The fact that Lucas was younger than Allison, her eldest, made it all the more absurd to them. They saw him as a gold digger, someone after her wealth, and they couldn't stomach the thought of their mother being so foolish. "You can't seriously be considering this," Allison had shouted one evening, her face red with anger. "He's a child, Mom. What could he possibly offer you?" Victor, the eldest son, had been equally vocal. "This isn't love. It's a midlife crisis. You need someone who understands you, who has lived the same life you've lived, not some teenager." Caroline sat silently, absorbing their words, but her heart was with Lucas. She had known that this would come, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He makes me feel something I haven't felt in years, something real." Her words were met with silence. Her children's faces, twisted in disbelief and disgust, made it clear that they would never accept Lucas. But Caroline, determined to follow her heart, refused to let their judgment dictate her happiness. Lucas, on the other hand, had always been kind and respectful. He never tried to challenge her wealth or her family's power. He only wanted her for who she was, not what she had. And despite the tension in the air, their bond only grew stronger. In a quiet, private moment, Caroline took Lucas's hand in hers and with tears in her eyes said, "You make me feel like I can dream again, like I can be loved, truly loved, for who I am." Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "I love you, Caroline, not because of your money or your name, but because of who you are. I don't care about what anyone thinks. All I care about is you." Caroline had never known such pure love. For so many years, she had been surrounded by people who had agendas, who were either too afraid or too self-interested to love her unconditionally. But Lucas had broken through her walls, showing her that love didn't have to come with conditions, with expectations. Yet the outside world wasn't so kind. As the relationship became public, the backlash intensified. The tabloids were relentless, painting Lucas as a fortune hunter, a manipulator. They called Caroline foolish, mocking her for choosing a boy over her own children. Her social circles began to distance themselves, as the weight of scandal hung heavy in the air. But Caroline stood her ground. She stopped attending family gatherings, refusing to back down from her love for Lucas. Slowly, she started to realize something powerful. The people who truly mattered were the ones who saw her for who she was, not the person they wanted her to be. And Lucas, despite all the judgment and prejudice, stood by her, unwavering in his affection. It wasn't an easy journey. There were days filled with tears, days where Caroline questioned whether she was making a mistake. But every time Lucas held her hand or whispered sweet words in her ear, she knew she had made the right choice. They weren't just lovers, they were companions, confidants, and friends. Her children, however, continued to fight her every step of the way. They tried to intervene, to sabotage her relationship, but Caroline remained steadfast. She had lived her life for them, building a legacy and providing for their futures. But now, at 70, she had the right to live for herself. As time passed, the media frenzy slowly faded, but the scars remained. Still, Caroline and Lucas continued to love each other, proving that age, wealth, and family opinion held no power over the heart. Their love was genuine, raw, and unapologetic. One winter evening, as Caroline sat by the fire, Lucas brought her a glass of wine and sat beside her, his young face full of the same innocence and passion that had first drawn her to him. She looked at him, the man who had changed her world, and whispered, "I love you, Lucas." His eyes softened and he smiled, "And I love you, Caroline. Always." In the end, Caroline realized that love was not about age or status. It was about finding that one person who could truly see you, who could make you feel alive, even in the twilight years of your life. And Lucas had done just that. Title: Love Beyond the Years, Part 2. Months passed since Caroline and Lucas had chosen to embrace their love, despite the harsh judgment from her children, family, and society. The mansion, which once echoed with the chatter of family gatherings and the clink of fine glasses, now stood quiet, save for the footsteps of Caroline and Lucas. The media's scrutiny had faded somewhat, but the tension between mother and children was a constant ache in Caroline's chest. The family gatherings were no longer an option for her. Caroline couldn't stand the cold glances, the whispering, the pity in their eyes. Her eldest son, Victor, still refused to speak to her, his pride too bruised by her refusal to conform. Alison, the only one who still tried to reach out, sent her long letters filled with anger and disappointment. She tried to meet them halfway, explaining the depth of her feelings for Lucas, but their minds were made up. The worst blow, however, came from her youngest son, Stephen, who was once her closest ally. In a confrontation that tore Caroline's heart to shreds, Stephen told her, "I can't watch you throw your life away like this. He's using you, Mum. You're too old to understand that." The words stung more than she could have imagined. She had spent years raising her children, pouring love and effort into them, and now they couldn't see past their own egos to understand her happiness. But Caroline, though devastated, knew one thing. Her heart was with Lucas, and she wouldn't let her children's refusal to understand tear that apart. In the solitude of her room that night, she thought about her life. She had spent decades building an empire, being admired for her intellect, her business savvy, and her relentless drive. She had never let anyone tell her what to do. She had broken glass ceilings and defied the norms of society. So why now, at 70, would she let her children's objections dictate her love life? She had earned this. She deserved it. The next morning, when Lucas walked into her study, carrying a bouquet of fresh roses, his usual sweet gesture, Caroline kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "I'm not giving up on us." Lucas smiled, his youthful energy lighting up the room, but there was a shadow of worry in his eyes. "I don't want to see you hurt, Caroline. I know they're your children, and I understand that their rejection stings." Caroline gently cupped his face in her hands. "You've already brought me more joy than I've known in years. The rest of the world, including my children, will have to come to terms with it in their own time. But what matters most is you and me, Lucas." Lucas nodded, though a part of him still worried. He was young, and as much as he loved Caroline, he sometimes felt the weight of their difference in age. There were days when he doubted if he was doing the right thing. How could they possibly build a future together when their worlds were so different? But the love they shared was undeniable. He had never been more sure of anything in his life. The days turned into weeks, and despite the deepening divide with her children, Caroline grew more comfortable in her relationship with Lucas. They went on secret getaways, sometimes to private islands, sometimes to the art galleries Caroline loved. She reveled in the intimacy of their connection, in the way Lucas made her feel treasured. But even in their private moments of joy, the outside world continued to judge them. It wasn't just her children who were cruel. The world around them looked at their love with suspicion. The public tabloids, once fascinated by their relationship, began to turn on Caroline. The headlines grew more sensational. Caroline Montgomery's shocking romance, a millionaire and her young toy boy. Or greed in the heart of love, the shocking story behind Caroline Montgomery's new relationship. The words were knives. Caroline could feel each cut, each piercing headline, as if they were directed at her very soul. Yet the more the world tried to tear them apart, the more resolute she became in her decision. Then came the pivotal moment, the confrontation with her eldest son, Victor. It wasn't planned, but it happened one afternoon when he showed up unannounced at the mansion. He had flown in from New York, the city where he had set up his own company, and he was furious. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice cold and distant as he entered her study. Caroline, seated by the window, looked up from the book she had been reading. "What is it, Victor?" He paced for a moment, hands clenched at his sides, before turning to face her. "You're embarrassing yourself. This relationship with Lucas, it's beyond ridiculous. You're too old for him, and you're too smart to let him manipulate you. You're making a fool of yourself." Caroline's heart clenched. She'd spent so many years trying to protect her children from the harsh realities of the world, but now they were the ones she needed to shield herself from. She stood up slowly, her age and her wisdom evident in the grace with which she held herself. "I'm not a fool, Victor. I've built this empire with my own hands, and I've made decisions for myself all my life. This is no different. Lucas loves me, and I love him." Victor's face twisted in disbelief. "He doesn't love you. He's using you. You're his ticket to a life of luxury. He doesn't care about you, Mom." Caroline's voice was steady but firm. "You don't know him. You don't know us. This isn't about luxury. It's about love. And you're right about one thing. I'm not young. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve love, Victor." The words hung in the air, thick with emotion. Victor's eyes were wide with frustration, and for a moment Caroline wondered if he might finally understand. But he didn't. Instead, he walked out without another word, leaving her standing alone in the empty room. After that, things changed. The arguments with her children grew more intense, but Caroline refused to budge. For the first time in her life, she realized that she had to live for herself. No one could make her feel guilty for choosing happiness. Then, one evening, something beautiful happened. Lucas, sensing the strain in Caroline's life, took her hand and led her out onto the terrace. The view was breathtaking, the city lights twinkling below, The stars scattered across the sky. "Caroline," Lucas said softly, "we've been through so much, but I promise you I'll never stop loving you. I'm here for you, always. And no matter what happens, we'll get through this together." A tear escaped Caroline's eye, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from gratitude. She had found love, even in the most unexpected of places, and it was real. No matter what her children thought, no matter what society said, Caroline had found something priceless. Someone who saw her, who loved her, who cared for her in a way she had never known before. And she wasn't about to let anyone take that from her.